Hey, my name is Donopoli. Tonight, I'm sharing 4 of the scariest stories I found on Reddit. As you listen, ask yourself, do you think these stories are real? Strange, unexplainable, terrifying. Could something like this happen in your city? Let me know what you think and where you're from in the comments, if you dare. It started with a single tap. Just one. Light knock at my bedroom window. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe a bird or a tree branch. But when it happened again, louder this time, I froze. You don't expect someone or something to be at your second-story window at midnight. I live in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing ever happens here. My house faces a wooded area, and I'm used to the occasional rustling of animals or the creak of the old trees. But this was deliberate. I felt it in my gut. I turned off my bedside lamp, hoping to make the room pitch black. My heart was racing as I crept toward the window. The tapping had stopped, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I pulled the curtain back, just enough to peek outside. Nothing. Just the trees swaying in the wind. I exhaled, relieved, and laughed at myself for overreacting. But as I let the curtain fall back, I caught it. Just a glimpse. A pale, white face staring at me from the corner of the window. I stumbled backward, my breath caught in my throat. When I dared to look again, the face was gone. My heart pounded in my ears as I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it. Maybe it was just a trick of the light or a reflection. That's what I told myself as I locked my window and crawled back into bed. The next morning I went outside to check. Nothing was out of place. No footprints, no signs of anyone climbing up. I told myself it had to be a dream, but deep down I knew better. That night it happened again. The tapping. 3 sharp knocks this time, like someone knocking on a door. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, praying it would stop, but it didn't. The knocks became louder, more insistent, until I finally gathered the courage to look. This time, the face wasn't just watching. It was pressed against the glass, its lips stretched into an unnatural smile. I screamed, and in an instant, it was gone. I didn't sleep that night. I kept all the lights on and stayed in the living room, clutching my phone, ready to call the police. But what would I say? That I saw a face at my window? That someone or something was taunting me? They'd think I was crazy. The next day, I installed security cameras. I felt safer knowing I'd have proof if it happened again. But that night, nothing happened. No taps, no knocks, no face. I started to think maybe it was over, until I checked the footage. At exactly 3 a.m., the camera outside my window picked up movement. I watched in horror as a figure stepped into view. It was tall, impossibly thin, and moved in jerky, unnatural motions. Its head tilted at an odd angle as it approached the window. Then it did something I'll never forget. It raised a hand and waved at the camera before disappearing into the woods. I don't know what it is or why it's targeting me, but every night I hear the tapping, and every night it gets louder. They say you should never stare into a mirror for too long, that it can play tricks in your mind. I never believed it, until now. It started last week, the first night I moved into my new apartment. The place wasn't much, just a small 1-bedroom with old, creaky floors and mismatched fixtures. But the rent was cheap, and it was close to work, so I didn't complain. The previous tenant had left a few pieces of furniture behind, including an antique mirror mounted on the bedroom wall. It was beautiful, ornate, with a gold frame that looked like something out of a museum. I loved it immediately. The first few nights were uneventful. I'd come home from work, eat dinner, scroll through my phone, and fall asleep. But on the 4th night, something changed. As I was brushing my teeth, I glanced at the mirror like I always do and noticed something strange. My reflection lingered. It's hard to explain. I turned my head and the reflection followed, but it felt delayed. Just a fraction of a second, like it wasn't moving in sync with me. I laughed it off, thinking I was just tired, and went to bed. The next morning I noticed something else. The reflection of the room in the mirror didn't quite match reality. A small detail. A chair that had been slightly out of place. In the mirror, it was perfectly aligned with the table. I moved the chair, checked the reflection again, and everything was back to normal. Weird, but not alarming. That night, I woke up around 3 a.m., feeling like something was off. My bedroom was dark, but the moonlight streaming through the window cast just enough light for me to see the mirror. My stomach dropped. There was a face in it, not mine. It was faint, almost like a smudge, but it was there. Eyes, a nose, a mouth twisted into a grimace. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and looked again. It was gone. I told myself it was just a trick of the light. Maybe my half-asleep brain playing games with me. I rolled over and pulled the blanket over my head, willing myself to sleep. But things only got worse. Over the next few days, I started to notice other strange things. The mirror felt colder. When I stood near it, the air seemed heavier, like I was being watched, and then there were the sounds. Soft whispers, almost too faint to hear. They only happened when I was alone, and they always seemed to come from the direction of the mirror. One night, as I was lying in bed, I decided to test something. I grabbed my phone and set it to record video, then placed it on the dresser facing the mirror. I hit record, turned off the lights, and went to sleep. The next morning I checked the footage. At first it seemed normal. Just me, lying in bed, the occasional toss and turn. But around 3 a.m., the screen flickered, and I froze. A shadow moved across the room, but not in the room itself, in the mirror. It moved slowly, deliberately, and then stopped. I watched in horror as the shadow leaned closer to the mirror's surface, and for a split second, a face appeared. Gaunt, pale, with hollow eyes that seemed to stare straight at me. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The final straw came 2 nights ago. I had covered the mirror with a blanket, thinking that would stop whatever was happening. But when I woke up in the middle of the night, the blanket was on the floor, and the mirror was uncovered. I swear I hadn't touched it. And in the mirror, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Me. But it wasn't just my reflection. It was me, standing there, smiling in a way I never smile. A slow, menacing grin that sent chills down my spine. I wasn't smiling in real life. I was sitting there, frozen with fear. My reflection raised a hand and I didn't move. It waved at me. I bolted out of the room and spent the rest of the night on the couch, every light in the apartment turned on. The next morning I called a moving company. I'm staying with a friend now, but the mirror is still there in that apartment. I couldn't bring myself to touch it again. I keep wondering, though, what if it wasn't just a reflection? What if, for a moment, it was real? It wasn't until I moved out that I realized I'd been living with someone, or something, I couldn't explain. A few months ago, I rented a small 2-bedroom apartment downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but the price was right, and it was close to work. The landlord told me the second bedroom had been used for storage by the previous tenant. Since I didn't need the extra space, I figured I'd do the same. I piled a few boxes in there, closed the door, and didn't think much about it. For the first few weeks, everything seemed normal. Work was busy, so I spent most of my time out of the apartment. But when I was home, I started noticing little things that didn't make sense. The thermostat was always a few degrees colder than I'd left it. The faucet in the kitchen would drip, even though I'd double-checked that it was off. And sometimes I'd hear faint creaks and thuds from the second bedroom. I told myself it was just an old building settling. That's what people always say, right? Old places make noises. But one night, as I was getting ready for bed, I noticed something strange. The door to the second bedroom was open. Just a crack, but open. I was sure I'd closed it. I walked over, pushed it shut, and went to bed, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling in my chest. But the next morning it was open again. This time, I decided to check inside. The room was just as I'd left it, empty, except for a few boxes stacked against the wall. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe the latch was loose. But that didn't explain the noises. A week later, I came home late from work. It had been a long day, and I was exhausted. As I stepped into the apartment, I heard it. A faint sound, like someone whispering. I froze, listening intently, but it stopped as quickly as it had started. My first thought was that someone had broken in, but nothing was out of place. Every door and window was locked. I checked the second bedroom last, and when I opened the door, I felt it immediately. A cold draft that sent shivers down my spine. The air in the room felt heavy, oppressive. My boxes were still there, untouched, but something about the space felt wrong. I closed the door and didn't go back in. That night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps. Not faint creaks, but heavy, deliberate steps, moving through the apartment. My heart pounded as I sat up in bed, straining to hear. The sound stopped outside my bedroom door. I held my breath, waiting for it to open, but it didn't. After what felt like an eternity, I heard the footsteps retreating, heading toward the second bedroom. The next morning, I called the landlord to ask if anyone else had a key to the apartment. He assured me I was the only one. I mentioned the noises, and he hesitated before saying, "You're not the first tenant to mention strange things in that unit." I demanded to know what he meant, and after some coaxing, he told me about the tenant before me. She had a roommate, a young woman who lived in the second bedroom. One night, there was a fire in the apartment. The roommate never made it out. I couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, I sat in my living room, staring at the door to the second bedroom. I decided I needed proof, something to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. I set up my phone to record video and left it on the kitchen counter, angled toward the hallway. The next morning, I reviewed the footage. At first, it seemed normal, just a still, quiet apartment. But around 3:15 a.m., the second bedroom door slowly creaked open. My blood ran cold as a shadow moved across the hallway. It wasn't human. The shape was too distorted, too wrong. The shadow paused in front of the camera for a moment before disappearing into the darkness. That was it for me. I packed my things and left that day. I didn't even bother asking for my deposit back. I couldn't stay there, not after what I'd seen. I don't know what was in that apartment, but I still have nightmares about the shadow. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I can hear footsteps outside my bedroom door. It wasn't the call itself that scared me. It was the voice on the other end. Last Saturday, I was home alone, catching up on some laundry and enjoying a rare, quiet weekend. It was around 8 p.m. when my phone rang. The screen showed unknown caller. Normally I wouldn't answer, but I'd been waiting for a call back about a job interview, so I picked up. "Hello?" I said. At first, there was only silence. Then, after a few seconds, I heard something faint. It sounded like breathing, shallow and ragged. My stomach churned as I waited for a response. "Hello?" I said again, louder this time. Finally, a voice came through, low and barely audible. "You left the door open." I froze. The word sent a chill down my spine. My front door was locked. I'd checked it earlier. I looked over at it from where I was sitting. It was shut, secure. "Who is this?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. The line went dead. I stood up and double-checked the door. Locked. I peeked through the peephole. No one was there. My rational side told me it was probably just a prank call. Still, I couldn't shake the unease that had settled in my chest. I turned on every light in the house, just to feel safer. An hour passed. I was folding laundry in the living room when my phone buzzed again. Another unknown caller. My hands trembled as I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered. "Who is this?" "What do you want?" I demanded. There was silence again, but this time it didn't last long. The same low, chilling voice spoke. "You shouldn't have locked it." My heart stopped. I stared at the front door, the lock glinting under the light. Whoever this was, they had to be watching me. I rushed to the window, yanked the blinds open, and scanned the street. Nothing. Just the empty sidewalk and the occasional parked car. I hung up and immediately called the police. They told me they'd send someone to check the area, but I could tell they didn't take me seriously. To them, it was probably just another harmless prank. But then, the knock started. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the front door. I backed away, clutching my phone like a lifeline. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to sound braver than I felt. No answer. Just another 3 knocks. I inched closer, keeping my eyes on the peephole. When I finally worked up the nerve to look, no one was there. The hallway was empty. The police arrived about 10 minutes later. 2 officers walked through the house, checked the front and backyards, and found nothing. They told me to call again if anything else happened and left. I felt a little safer knowing they'd been there, but the sense of dread lingered. That night I triple-checked every lock in the house before going to bed. I told myself it was over, that whoever had been messing with me was gone. But at 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing. Another call. Another unknown caller. I didn't want to answer it. I really didn't. But something compelled me to pick up. This time, the voice was clearer, closer. "I'm already inside." The line went dead. My blood ran cold. I sat frozen in bed, my eyes darting around the dark room. I could feel it. Someone was there. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept under my bed and crept toward the door, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the handle. The house was silent. Too silent. I moved room to room, flipping on lights, checking every closet and corner. Nothing. No one. But when I got back to my bedroom, the closet door was open. I hadn't opened it. I backed out of the room slowly, my bat raised, and ran out of the house. I didn't stop until I was at my neighbor's door, pounding on it like a madman. They called the police for me, and when the officers arrived, they searched the house again. Still nothing. I stayed with my neighbors that night, but I didn't sleep. The next morning I packed up and left. I didn't care about breaking my lease. I couldn't stay there another second. I don't know who or what called me that night, but sometimes, late at night, I still hear those 3 words echoing in my head. I'm already inside.